Hi, today I want to talk about intangible cultural heritage, which is kind of the flip side of cultural appropriation. You have to acknowledge intangible cultural heritage before you can really talk about cultural appropriation. What are we talking about when we talk about intangible cultural heritage? So we're familiar with cultural heritage that is tangible. That's why you would say go visit Egypt and see the pyramids, or you think of Paris and you think of the Eiffel Tower as part of that cultural heritage. Well, there's also an intangible cultural heritage, and that is really about things that are more pertaining to the intangible realm, meaning that the rights aren't really about things that you can touch and grab and hold for yourself, much like intellectual property, copyrights, trademarks, or patents, which are intangible rights. So, for instance, the copyright that is in a book is not about the physical book, but it is about the expression of the story that is in that book. So you can give the book to somebody else, but you can't just reproduce that literary work for free, for instance, because then you would be violating a copyright. So there are intangible rights in mainstream law, but there's also this idea of intangible cultural heritage. So intangible cultural heritage can come in a number of forms, but most importantly, it is intangible cultural heritage because it is identifiable as part of some culture, some typically traditional culture, and you can think of it as a boundary crossing, not as a legal boundary, but as a cultural boundary. Is there a global definition of intangible cultural heritage? Well, I like to go with the United Nations definitions because the United Nations is an international organization. The term cultural heritage, as UNESCO acknowledges, has changed over the decades, but really we're talking about living traditions, right? All traditions, performing arts, knowledge and skills. And an important factor that UNESCO does identify and acknowledge, intangible cultural heritage is important to maintaining cultural diversity, cultural exchange, and mutual respect. An example of intangible cultural heritage, as I've said, it can be oral traditions, dances, songs, it could be traditional medicine, native headdress. And so you could think of how the Redskins, for instance, have used native headdress as one of their symbols. Intangible cultural heritage can also be things like the Maasai traditional dress and colors that were incorporated into the Louis Vuitton fashion line one year. The controversy that comes up around intangible cultural heritage is whether or not it isn't just the common heritage of mankind. Does it belong to everybody, and is it free for everybody to use? Are we trying to own culture? I would say it's not about owning culture. The question is whether in a particular instance, has there been a respectful engagement and interaction? Is the intangible cultural heritage being used respectfully? When is it boundary crossing, and when is it not boundary crossing? Like and subscribe to continue this conversation with me. Thank you.